Viability. So viability is very important, and again it's linked to proving that your project is going to be able to be delivered and deliver the outcomes and objectives that they are wanting. So viability is evidenced in a few ways. One is through stakeholder engagement, so making sure you've got the people you need to be able to successfully deliver the project. Two is making sure you've addressed all of the possible risks that might arise, and you've mitigated them as much as possible. And the third is the sustainability of the project over the long term. So for stakeholder engagement, you need to describe what you have done and with who. So who have you spoken to? What have you done to get all of the people that you need to deliver the project successfully on board? So if you need Shire approvals, you must have spoken to the Shire to make sure that that's going to be likely, or have started the process of getting the approvals at least, and know how long it's going to take. If you, for the cooperative example, for example, you need to have spoken to the small producers. You can't just identify that there's a problem with small producers not having economies of scale, but not actually got people on board, not gone out to these small producers, got them to agree that there is a problem and that they want a solution, and got people on board, because you can't deliver the project unless they are actually willing to be involved. So these are stakeholders you need. If you are getting funding from anybody, then you need that stakeholder to provide the funding. And you need to evidence that you have spoken to them and they are committed. So you need a letter from them to say, we are willing to provide XXX specific amount of dollars towards this project. Or I am a small producer, I agree that this is a problem and I am willing to be involved in this project. So you must make sure that anyone that you need for the project has provided a letter of commitment to show that they are going to be involved. So talk about all sections that will be needed or will be impacted. So if there are other businesses that will be impacted, or local government, talk to all of them, make sure you've actually had conversations with them and you've got them to agree that this is a great project. So for example, if we are talking about the RED grant, well obviously that's a government agency, they're a government entity. So if you're going to be doing an agricultural project, they'd be really interested in what the Department of Ag, or now DPIRD, thinks of your project. So go to them, get them to explain what they think of your project. Do they agree that it's a good project, that it's viable? Yes, letter of support. You've consulted the experts and they agree that this is a good project. So that's going to obviously add weight to your project. Now with letters of support, if they all say the same thing, they're not helpful. So if the body of the letter of support is just copy and pasted and it's a different person signing it, the assessor will look at that and realise that it's meaningless. It's not helpful to have a letter of support that it's just a copy and paste. What we want is something from the person to say, this is evidence that the project is needed, we agree the project's needed, we agree that the outcomes will be amazing, and if they are required to do anything for the project, to evidence their commitment. That's what your letter of support needs to be. Now, risk. So for your risk, identifying risk, if you're going to attach a risk management matrix, that's great. You can do that in the RED grant applications. There are free risk management matrix templates that are downloadable on the internet, so you can download them. They're all essentially the same in terms of they look at what is the likelihood of the risk happening and what would be the impact if the risk happened. How bad would it be? You look at that and then look at what can you do to minimise the chance of this risk happening. What will mitigate this risk? And it asks you to explain that. So this shows you have considered all the possible things that could go wrong, and you know what you will do to minimise the chance of them going wrong, or if they do go wrong, what you would do. Make sure you cover all risks, not just during the project, but also after the project. So a risk of this cooperative, for example, would be that the retail stores aren't interested. They're not interested in the product that you guys are supplying. Now, to mitigate this risk, you should have done your market research. So you could show that you've mitigated the risk because we've gone and spoken to X, Y and Z retailers and they have all expressed an interest. Oh, and here's an evidence letter of support from them. So that's one way to mitigate the risk. If, however, there are not enough customers, we intend to undertake a marketing campaign of some sort. So that's the way to explain the risks, but make sure they're not just about during the project, they're also post-project. So what we also need to do is to address any lingering questions that might be there. So the risk assessment section is one way of you thinking about what the assessor might think of your project. Is there something that the assessor might be concerned about with your project? And if there is, this is how you can address that. You can put it in there as a risk and show why it's not that big a risk anymore because you've already done all this work to mitigate it, or what you would do if it were to happen. So it's one way of putting the assessor's mind at ease if there's any lingering questions about your project viability or your project. The other factor of viability is sustainability. So this is how your project will last, how it will be beneficial in the long term. So if you're purchasing a piece of equipment, or if you're creating an asset, you need to prove that you are going to be able to sustain it, that you're going to be able to fund the operational costs, that you're going to be able to do all of the things that you said you're going to do. So as an example, this manufacturing capability, we've said that we're going to purchase this piece of equipment and storage shed, and on the basis of that, we are going to deliver product to the eastern states. But on an ongoing basis, this piece of equipment must be maintained, or it needs to be replaced every few years. So how are you going to fund that? Show that the extra income you're going to get is going to be more than enough to maintain the piece of equipment, run the piece of equipment, and replace it in a few years' time when you need to. Any project that you are doing, you need to explain how it is going to continue in the long term once the grant funding has run out.